Okay. Welcome to Code Speaks. It is a series of sessions with leading industrial experts. Today, SIAM VIT is proud to conduct an event with Mr. Cleve, inventor Matlab, chairman and co-founder of Mathworks. Mr. Cleve is an American mathematician and computer programmer specializing in numerical analysis, who is also the original author of Matlab and one of the founders of Mathworks. He is one of the authors of Linpack and Icepack, Fortran libraries for numerical computing of Matlab. He received a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Caltech and a PhD in mathematics from Stanford. He is a member of the National Academy of Engineering, and we're proud to say he's the past president of SIAM International, for which he has been awarded the SIAM Fellow Award. Now we'd like to call Dr. Karthikeyan, our beloved HOD of the Mathematics Department in School of Advanced Sciences, VIT Vellore, to please say a few words.
Uh, Good evening to one and all present here. First of all, we would like to welcome Cleve sir for taking time out to interact with our students. We at the School of Advanced Sciences at VIT are honored to have you on board. Thank you, sir. We would like to we would like also to thank SIAM VIT for consistently conducting such informative and helpful events for students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir, for your constant motivation and support. With that said, we're very excited to begin with this session, sir. Cleve, sir, the session is all yours.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. You have it written. I should get the copy you wrote and give it to other people to introduce to me. You did such a good job. Thank you.
So it's our honor that you're here with us today.
Let's see, here we go. You see my screen now.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
So I'd like to talk about two subjects that are very near and dear to my heart, MATLAB and the singular value decomposition. These two have grown up together. Neither one was known 50 or 60 years ago, but now both are very popular. I assume you've heard of MATLAB, but probably haven't heard of the SVD or don't know much about it. So I want to tell you something about the SVD. So here's what you're familiar with: laptops, cell phones, MATLAB, Google. I'm going to go back before any of those things existed. I'm going to go back to how I got started in computers with paper tape and punch cards and computers that filled up a whole room. We wrote this book when I was a graduate student. The singular value decomposition is only theoretical in this book. There was nothing about computing with the SVD. We didn't know how to compute it. And one day at the seminar, George Forsyth said, "Would somebody please figure out how to compute the darn thing?" And so Gene Golub did. Gene Golub was a new assistant professor at Stanford. He devised the algorithm that we still use today in connection with his colleague Volvo Kahn. And then Christian Reins in Munich put out some algol programs for doing the SVD. Golub is famous for many things, but he was probably proudest of the SVD algorithm. And let's see, I should touch that mouse. And so this is his California license plate. I was when that shortly after that was Golub developed the algorithm. I was a professor in New Mexico. I spent it one day a week at Los Alamos National Laboratory, and I made a film, actual 16 millimeter celluloid film about the SVD. The SVD was new, but not anybody had heard about it. And I also wanted to experiment with the Los Alamos graphics library. You're going to see this film which was made in 1976. It's going to look very crude, but this was cutting edge graphics back then. Even putting Greek letters on the screen was something new. So I'm going to use this film to introduce you to the singular value decomposition.
The computer is used to simplify the matrix so that most of the entries will be zeros. One method is known as the singular value decomposition. The original matrix is represented as the product of three matrices. In the second of these matrices, the only non-zero elements lie on the diagonal. The other two matrices must preserve the properties of the original matrix, so they are orthogonal matrices. Each is the product of elementary matrices, which affect only two rows or columns. Scientists at Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory have been studying methods for the accurate and efficient calculation of the singular value decomposition, and of describing to computer users how the computation is carried out. In this three-dimensional representation of a small matrix, each pyramid depicts the magnitude of a single matrix element. The diagonal of the matrix runs from the upper left to the lower right. Orthogonal transformations will be used to introduce zeros into the matrix. The initial transformations put zeros into the first row and then the first column. Each transformation affects two other columns or rows, shown here in blue. Later transformations introduce zeros into later rows and columns, while preserving the zeros already obtained. The second stage of the calculation is a repetitive or iterative process which reduces the size of the remaining off-diagonal elements, but does not zero them in a single step. The calculations now being shown are primarily intended to reduce the size of the off-diagonal element at the lower right-hand corner. Once an off-diagonal element has reached a negligible magnitude, it is set to zero. The computation of the corresponding diagonal element is then complete, and the resulting singular value is shown in blue. The final diagonal matrix, together with the two transforming matrices which produced it, then provide the basis for a complete analysis of the original matrix and the system which it models.
Well, that was a film made in, as they say, in 1976. That was only part of the film. The entire film is about 6 minutes long. If you want to see the whole thing to learn more about the SVD, you can Google Molder SVD movie and get this link on YouTube. Shortly after I made that film, the producers of the Star Trek movie from Paramount came to Los Alamos to get graphics to show on the bridge of the Enterprise. In the story, the universe is being threatened by a mysterious force called V'ger, and Star Trek crew sets out to save the universe from V'ger. Now, look over Spock's shoulder at the scope behind Spock.
A maximum phaser strike directly at the beam might weaken it just enough for us to break free.
Break free to where, Commander? Any show of resistance would be futile, Captain.
We don't know that, Mr. Spock. Why are you opposed to trying? Why bring us inside? Not to destroy us. They could have done that outside.
They still can.
Curiosity, Mr. Decker. Insatiable curiosity.
Well, I had to get enough of that film clip. I wanted to get in Spock's eyebrows, but you can see over his shoulder is the singular value decomposition being computed. If I try and zoom in on it, and the resolution I get out of the film, it's not very clear, but here's the frame from the original Los Alamos movie. So the SVD helped the Star Trek crew save the universe from V'ger. Our host mentioned the Linpack and Icepack. These were Fortran subroutine libraries to do matrix computation that I was working on in the at the same time I was making that film. In fact, that film used some of the early Icepack Fortran code. Here's the authors of Linpack in 1976 and 35 years later. That's Jack Dungara, me, Pete Stewart, and Jim Bunch. So in 35 years, Dungara has lost the most hair, but I have the coolest shirt. I want to have my students have access to Linpack and Icepack without writing Fortran subroutines and in an interactive environment. So you would get results immediately rather than go through the compile, load, link, get your output later that was the usual mode of computing. So I wrote this program. This was the first Matlab. Here's the introductory screen. These are all the functions in that Matlab. It wasn't a programming language. It was a simple calculator. It didn't have M files, didn't have toolbox, didn't have graphics, didn't have ODEs, it didn't have FFTs. It just had these matrix calculations and a simple language you can use to manipulate them. I want to show you a calculation from that original Matlab. So this is output from the original Matlab before Mathworks. Set n equal to 8, compute the magic square of order n. I've been interested in magic squares since I was in junior high school, and you get this matrix, this 8 by 8 matrix. What makes it a magic square? Well, if E is the vector of all ones, then A times E, this is matrix multiply the matrix times E, actually sums the rows of A. And the rows all add up to 260. If I do E transpose times A, this sums the columns and they all add up to 260. I can sum the diagonal and get 260. In order to get the opposite diagonal, I have to do some subscripting to permute the columns, interchange the columns. Again, I get 260. Why is it 260? Well, the matrix consists of the numbers from 1 to n squared. That's those numbers. And the sum of all those numbers, when you distribute it around n columns, is 260. So the sum has to be 260. Now let's try and solve a system of equations. I want to solve AX equals B, where B is this matrix of 260s, but when I try to solve it, I get an error. I'm told the matrix is singular. Why is that matrix singular? Well, I compute the SVD, the singular value decomposition, and here are the singular values, the diagonal elements on sigma. The biggest singular value is 260. Now, where did that come from? So that's your homework assignment. You prove that the largest singular value of any magic square is equal to the magic sum. There's two other singular values that aren't zero, and then this matrix has 5 zero singular values. That makes it singular. The fact that the last singular value is 0. So I can take just 3 columns out of U. U has 8 columns, but I take just 3 of them. And I take 3 columns out of V, and I make S be the 3 by 3 diagonal matrix with the non-zero singular values. So that's a small matrix. And U times S times V transpose gives me back the original matrix. So this is an example of a low rank approximation. Producing low rank models is an important part of that's essentially what's going on in artificial intelligence today that's so popular, is this kind of computation. Much more elaborate than this, but it's low rank. That's important. Now when I go to solve AX equals B, I can express that as U times S times V transpose times X equals B. Multiply both sides of the equation by U transpose, since it's orthogonal, that's the U inverse, and then use the backslash in Matlab to solve a system, a 3 by 3 system with the matrix S. And I get back my ones this way. AX equals B is singular. There are many solutions, and the SVD here gives me back the one I wanted. Here's something else that was in the original Matlab, flops, floating point operations. We don't have that in Matlab today. It costs too much, it takes too much time to count each floating point operation. But back then I could, and I'm told that the last statement I did, this one, to compute X, took 264 floating point ops, and altogether I used 17,000 floating point ops. So that was something that we don't have in Matlab today. This was kind of a joke. Here's the plot command. Plot the singular values of the magic square. All I had to do graphics was just to put these characters on the screen. But you can see here that the first 3 singular values are not 0, and the rest of the other singular values are 0. That's a hint of this low rank property that's important today for much bigger matrices. The singular values fall off rapidly, and the matrix can be approximated by one with low rank. Okay, that's computing SVD with the original Matlab. In 1979, I did a sabbatical at Stanford. I taught the graduate numerical analysis course, and I used that Matlab in the class, this kind of simple matrix calculator. The math and computer science students were not impressed. This was not state-of-the-art math. It was not state-of-the-art computer science. But there were 6 or 8 engineering students in the class, and they loved Matlab. They were doing things that I didn't know anything about: control theory, signal processing, systems theory. I didn't know what that was, but matrices were the language of that subject, so they loved that Matlab. This is John Little, Jack Little. He was known as John back then. Today's Jack. He didn't take the class, but a friend of his did. And so that friend showed him Matlab, and Little as a control engineer and was doing consulting in control systems in a company near Stanford. And he started using MATLAB, and he went a couple of years later, he went down to Sears Roebuck and bought this compact portable computer and reprogrammed MATLAB, re-implemented it in C, added M files, added toolboxes, began to use graphics, and we founded the Mathworks in California in 1984. And MATLAB made the Mathworks MATLAB made its debut at a controls conference just before Christmas. So we had a company in 1984. It had only one employee, Little. This is a graph, a log plot of the size of Mathworks for the last 35 years. Originally, the company doubled every year. 1 employee, 2 employees, 4 employees. We can't keep on doubling. Now we are doubling rate about every 5 years. Here's the company when there were only 8 people in it. These people in 1987. Little is down in front there. I didn't work for the company for the first 5 years. I was one of the founders, but I wasn't an employee. But I joined the company in 1989 when it had this many people. Here I am over on this side, and here's Little here. About half of these people, a little over half of these people, still work for the Mathworks. By 2005, we had grown to the point that we had offices in about a dozen places around the world. So if we wanted to get a company photo, we had to get all these group photos of the local offices. We can't get the whole company together not today. Here was a picture taken in 2019 at our 35th anniversary. There's about 3,000 people in this picture, and I'm down here in this, down here. So here's Mathworks at a glance. Some of the facts about Mathworks. 2019 was the first year that we did $1 billion in revenue. About more than half of it was from outside the U.S. We have 5,500 employees around the world. A third of them are outside the U.S. The company is privately held, and it's profitable every year since its founding. Little was the original CEO. He's still the CEO. So I'm the father of MATLAB, but Jack Little is the father of Mathworks, the company. This last statistic amazed me when I first heard it, that we get 500,000 visits per day to our website. Here's the company's buildings in Natick, Massachusetts, west of Boston. These are brand new buildings. We just occupied them last year. It's on this lake. And if you take this highway, this is Route 9, and follow it over to about here, that's our main headquarters. So there's the 2 campuses in Natick. This is an old slide, but it reminds me that MATLAB is not just matrix laboratory anymore. It's used in a huge number of different disciplines, applications. Here's hearing aids, electric car, control. Here's image processing, and electronics, all those businesses is where Matlab is. And that's because of these toolboxes. So a toolbox is a body of Matlab code that specializes its application to different disciplines. And you see how many toolboxes we have in these different areas. So, for example, one example is if you're designing a cell tower for a 5G telephone and want to make sure your equipment meets the 5G standard, you get a toolbox from Mathworks, and you model your circuits, your devices in the toolbox, and we see if you adhere to the standard. Lots of other vertical applications of Matlab. Then there's a whole other world called Simulink. This is Matlab's companion product built on top of Matlab. This is a Simulink program. You program Simulink, but with these blocks and these connections between blocks. The connections are signals that are solutions to ordinary differential equations. Here's Simulink for signal processing. Here's Simulink for robotics. And here's Simulink for automated driving. You want to have a block that detects the vehicle. There's a standard for that. You want to have another block that does lane detection. That gives you your coordinates, and you can combine them together, and here's your car being driven down automatically. That's what Simulink does. So between these toolboxes and Simulink, people ask about open source competitors to Matlab. The open source products don't have anything like these toolboxes or Simulink. Okay, let's get back to the SVD. Remember that we take any matrix and express it as the product of three matrices. Two of them are orthogonal, and the middle one is diagonal with the singular values down to the diagonal. There's a closely related calculation called the principal component analysis, PCA, that came out of the world of statistics. So if you have data, PCA involves setting up a coordinate system within the data, centered at the center of the data, and with orthogonal directions. That's the principal component analysis. And there are things called coefficients and latent scores that the statisticians talk about. So in 2006, I wrote that the SVD and the PCA should have links to each other. Weren't linked to each other, but should have links. And Wikipedia updated within a couple of days. It's the entries on SVD and PCA. Here's how you compute the principal component analysis. If you don't have SVD, you center the matrix and you compute x prime times x. So if you have 5,000 observations on 5 variables, x is 5,000 by 5, but this matrix called the covariance matrix is just 5 by 5, and you compute its eigenvalues. And that gives you the principal component analysis. Now, if you do have SVD, you can get the PCA directly from the SVD by computing the SVD and just reading off the statistical quantities. So SVD came out of my world, out of the numerical linear algebra. It works with the original data. PCA came out of statistics. It's important you center the data and then compute the eigenvalues of the covariance matrix. That's fine if all you're interested in is the large eigenvalues, and PCA does use the large eigenvalues. But if you want to do something like get the rank of the matrix or to get low rank approximations, then forming the covariance matrix loses the small singular values. So for that reason, the SVD is more reliable numerically, even though it's more work than the PCA. Okay, I could do, there's thousands of demos of the SVD I could do. I love this one. It's about the human gait by Nicholas Troji. At the time, he was a professor in Germany. He now has the Biomotion Lab in Canada. Troji is interested in the human gait and how we as human beings can look at how another person is walking and tell things about various attributes of that person. We can maybe tell the sex. We can tell the age just by the way the person's walking. In some cases, we even get a sense of the mood of the person from the way he's walking. So Troji took something like 60 of his graduate students in Germany, put these markers on them, and recorded the motion of the markers as they walked on a treadmill. So one subject produces a couple of dozen frames of video. In those frames, there are 15 markers that move in 3 dimensions. So that's 45 function of time, 45 time series that you get for each subject. So the raw data for a subject is a matrix with 45 rows and a couple of thousand columns. Here's some of the data. Here's some of the channels of the walking subject. It's periodic, sort of periodic, approximately periodic, because that's what walking is. But it's noisy and not exactly periodic. Here's what happens when you zoom in on the data. Now, in order to smooth the data and model the walker, he has a 5-term Fourier series. Omega is a scalar parameter. You compute omega. It's the only nonlinear parameter. You compute that with Fourier analysis. But then the important things, what I want to focus on, are the V's. V1 through V5 are the coefficients in this model, and they are the first 5 principal components. They come from computing the SVD on the data matrix, and you take the first 5. So that reduces your matrix from 45 rows and a couple of thousand columns down to just 45 by 5. And that can account for about 95, 97% of the data. But he goes a step further. The gender is not one of the principal components, but he has half of his subjects are female, half are males. He computes the SVD of all the females, another SVD of all males, and then the average of those two is called the Eigenwalker, a half German word, which means the characteristic walker or the everyman. And the difference between the two matrices is the gender. So I want to actually run Matlab now and show you. Here's some of Troji's subjects walking. This is the model of the walkers, and you can see they have different attributes in the way they walk. I'll go to the next 6 more subjects. Look at Bridget down here, swinging her elbows. Some more, and then here we go. Poor Jamie. Jamie's having a bad day. How do you know Jamie's a bad day? But he's walking slowly with his head down. That's what Troji's interested in. How do we see those things from the way people walk? Go to my two favorites here. Pablo and Patricia. They come next to each other alphabetically, but look at the difference between the walk of those two subjects. All right, you take all this data and average it all together, and you get the Eigenwalker. That's this person. This is the average walker, and we have 5 components that come out of the principal component analysis, come out of the SVD. And if I look at the components one at a time, well, the first component is static. The first component is just constant. There's no omega t term, and that gives the position of the Eigenwalker. Now, if we look at the second component, let's see, why aren't you? Oh. So here's the V1 cosine omega t term by itself. And we call that the stride. Here's the third component, the sine of omega V1, V3 times the sine of omega t. And you see how that works. And then these two are at twice the frequency. And the sum of those 5 motions gives this walker. Now, the gender was, you had to take the difference between the two groups. Let me move the gender slider here. So I'll put the gender up to 1. Can you see what the gender is? Let's go back here to in the other direction. Here's the gender. Here's the walker. Now, which gender is this? Amazon and Pixar have learned that in animation you want to over-emphasize an attribute, so I can move this gender bar to 3 times. This is overemphasizing one gender, and I move it over here, and I get the other gender. So there's the SVD and the Eigenwalker. If you go to the U.S. Patent Office and look at patents, there are 30,000 patents have been issued that somehow involve the principal component analysis, and almost 8,000 patents that involve the SVD. So this is useful in a wide range of subjects. Let me just take one of the patents. This is a patent by eHarmony. You've maybe heard of eHarmony. A dating website. So they have a method and system for identifying people who are likely to have a successful relationship. So eHarmony has patented the use of the principal component analysis in the dating business. Okay, long list of uses of the singular values. As I said, it's so Spock used it to save the universe from V'ger. Here's some other uses: eHarmony patent, crime forecasting, image compression, interest rate modeling, vibrations, gene expression. There was work recently on COVID, on the COVID-19 using the SVD. I had to put that on this list. A friend of mine, Orly Alter at the University of Utah, as using the SVD to look for the genetic precursors to brain tumors. Even the Mathworks logo, the vibrating L-shaped membrane, uses the SVD to compute the logo, and the list goes on. Well, that's my, I wanted to leave some time for questions. So let's see if we, what kind of questions we have. Oh, were any in the, oh, look at this.
Yes, sir. There are a few questions in the chat. So would you want me to go ahead and ask you?
Have you read them? Pick out some you're interested. Yeah, can't do all. Well, I can do is
one
yeah,
very
sure.
Right. So one very interesting question which I like the most. While you were giving your PPT, Anuj Jatri has written in the same context, can we expect major upgrades in code generation models? And will we ever see Matlab as an open source resource? It's there on the screen as well now.
No, I mean, no, you're not going to see Matlab as open source.
Right.
And so we have the companies supporting Matlab, and people can use Python and Julia and R to get a feeling for this kind of computation we do with Matlab. But then when you really start using it for serious work, then you need the real thing supported by the company.
Right, sir. So one more very interesting question by Anuj is that, so the current Matlab is up to date with all the modern technologies like EVs, robotics, and AI. What can we hope to see in the future of Matlab next? I think where all is the application now possible? Because from dating, as you mentioned, dating website to the gait, anything is now possible. What is the next future for Matlab? Where would it be applied next?
Well, I disagree that Matlab is up to date. We have hundreds of enhancements to Matlab that we choose among and work on. So every release, we release Matlab twice a year, and every release updates the toolboxes and adds some more toolboxes. So that's going to continue. That's going to continue that way. Here's one example.
Yes, sir.
So there's a function in Matlab that rounds the number to the nearest integer. What do you do when there's ties? Well, Matlab rounds up with ties. So I am working with right now on adding to the round function the other behaviors on ties, like round to even, round to odd. It's a minor update of a minor function, but that's what we do. That's what the people that work at Mathworks do.
Right, sir. So Sejal has asked, so what is your favorite feature of MATLAB?
What I love about MATLAB and what I love about my job is getting to learn about new things. So I don't know anything about the 5G standards. I visited our company and our outfit in Edinburgh or it's Scotland someplace, and they're working on this 5G stuff. I didn't know anything about it. I learned about it. Mathematics in biology, the whole business about signal processing controls. I didn't know anything about that years ago, and I'm learning that. So that's what I love about MATLAB is I get to learn new things.
Right, sir. So Samanvit is asking, so you have been inspiring a lot of students all around the world. Who were you the most inspired by to create MATLAB? Was there any single person who motivated you to go for MATLAB, or was there ever an idol of any sort?
The three big influences of my early life as a student, mentors of mine, first is J.H. Wilkinson. Wilkinson from the National Physical Laboratory in England was the world's leading expert on matrix computation. John Todd, also from the UK, was my professor at Stanford that got me involved in computing. And then George Forsyth at Stanford was my PhD advisor. So those three guys were my mentors.
Okay, sir.
Should
we move on to the next? Yeah. Yes, sir.
It's all academic. This business about having a company and $1 billion of income was never something that I'm glad we did it. I'm glad to go along for the ride, but I would never say that Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or those guys were my inspiration.
Right, sir. Right. So we'll move on to the next question. Mr. Brightside is asking, going further, how is MATLAB and Mathworks going to expand? Are you planning to go deeper into machine learning aspect or maybe the finance side?
Yes, both those. Those are both big businesses for us already. And the machine learning thing is hot right now. We've been in machine learning for a long time. It used to be called neural nets, and we had a neural net toolbox about 20 years ago. So this is not a new thing for us.
Right, sir.
But we're working on that. The finance, the guys in finance are use all the software they can get to try and get an edge on the other companies in finance.
Right, sir. So next question is, you have had such a long road. Did you ever lose hope? Has it only been highs or have there been lows too in your journey with MATLAB?
Yeah, there are highs and lows. I had a low an hour and a half ago when my computer didn't work. Getting ready for this talk, so but that's a minor low. No, I generally, as I say, I love my job. I'm not involved in running the Mathworks company. I live in Maryland. You know, the company's in Massachusetts. I work with the company with the math group of the company, work on bug reports,
Right,
work
sir.
on bugs, and I do talks like this, and it's a terrific time.
Right, sir. So we have a question by Shubham. So how would you describe your experience in SIAM? And in fact, all of us would like to know, how did you get in touch with SIAM and how did that journey begin?
Well, thank you for reminding me of that. I was talking with you before we went live. I've been
Yes,
involved
sir.
in SIAM all my professional life. When I joined SIAM when I was a grad student. Um, that was shortly after SIAM was started. I became a journal editor when I was a young faculty member. I've been on the SIAM Council. I've been on the SIAM Board of Trustees. I've been on SIAM President. I've published books with SIAM. Right now I'm involved with something called the M Cubed Mathworks Math Modeling Challenge, a competition
Right,
for
sir.
high school students that Mathworks sponsors, and I'm one of the judges. So I've been involved with the other professional societies that touch on this, the American Math Society, the IEEE Computer Society, and these guys, the Association of Computing Machinery, the ACM, all these are huge organizations. Each one of those is 10 times the size of SIAM. And for
Right.
my taste, they're too big and actually too political. SIAM
Oh,
is
okay.
a good size.
Right, sir. Right. Um, so we'll move on to the next
You
question.
now
Yes,
just
sir.
a minute, you
Yes,
can
sir. Yes, sir.
become you guys can become student members of SIAM. Now, student membership in SIAM is free. You have to have a faculty sponsor, I think, but
Yes, sir. Yes,
join
sir. Right.
SIAM. Join SIAM. Do it now. Well, it's getting late tonight over there. Do it tomorrow. Go join SIAM tomorrow if you're not already in SIAM.
So thank you for that, sir. SIAM VIT, people who are watching from SIAM VIT, you heard, sir. And everybody in VIT, you know which the chapter you have to go to next. So, sir, we'll move on to the next question. It's by Harshit. MATLAB started out as a tool completely based on operation on a matrix. Now it does pretty much everything, calculus, ML, etc. Did you ever imagine in the beginning that it would become something so big?
No, I had no
Or was
idea. But, yeah. So I've just published a big paper about the history of MATLAB in the ACM principles of programming languages. If you go to my web page on the Mathworks, there's a link to the history, and
right, sir.
so it turned out there were important things. So the business of working on arrays. So a matrix is an array that has certain operations defined on it, matrix multiplication, SVD. But the array itself is a very basic data structure for all kinds of computing. So the fact that we worked as arrays was important. And then the interactivity was important. The graphics. Many people just use MATLAB just for the graphics. That's been
Right, sir.
important.
Right.
And the notation with the colon to pick out rows or columns, or for I equals 1:n to do a for loop. That's that's simpler than it is in C or Java, and those things people like about MATLAB. So
Right, sir.
all those, and then we build up these communities: image processing, signal processing, biology,
Right.
finance. All these communities are built up around collections of MATLAB programs. Some of them are our toolboxes, and many of them are in fact open source. I mean, you can say that MATLAB is an open source because so many of the M files and toolboxes that people use are available openly. All the programs that I write are available openly from our website. So that part of MATLAB is open source.
Right. So to this question, actually, I wanted to ask, MATLAB becoming so big, was it also a reason that among good company, people who knew how to sort of implement this software for their own benefit, was company also the company you were in? Did that also make a difference?
Oh, sure. I mean, the company is everything. That the fact that we have this company is why MATLAB has become so big. It's not because of me. It's not because of the language. It's because of the company. That's what has made it big.
Right, sir.
We have in India. We have 4 offices in India, I think. Where are all our offices?
There's one in Chennai, I think. There's one in Gurgaon, and I'll have to check the other. I don't remember.
Yeah. There was recently some kind of competition that people use MATLAB for, students use MATLAB for, and it was reported on one of our meetings, and they had a map of the world with the number of participants in this competition, and the vast majority of them were from India. There was far more participants in this thing from India than there was in the rest of the world combined. So
sheer population here takes over everything, I think. That's also one of the reasons.
MATLAB is popular in China. All the students use MATLAB in China. They just don't pay for it. It's all pirated copies of MATLAB. So
something that's
okay. That's okay if the universities and the companies in China that use MATLAB pay for it. That's a good business for us. And what students have on their own computers.
Yes, sir.
I'd like.
So VIT has partnered with MATLAB. Our institute has actually partnered with MATLAB. Everybody has a MATLAB software because of that, and we've been learning a lot on MATLAB since first year itself.
Well,
so we'll move on. Yes, sir.
These campus-wide licenses for MATLAB are the answer to are very important. And we get a license for a place like VIT and make it available to all the students at VIT. And we're working to increase the number of those campus licenses. There's a couple of thousand of them already, but I don't know how many universities there are. So long way to go there.
Okay, sir. So we'll move on to the next question. This is an interesting one. Do you think MATLAB will be able to follow in a quantum computing future, like a quantum MATLAB toolbox?
Well, you've touched on
Sensitive nerve.
a controversial subject. I'm a skeptic about quantum computing. I don't expect to see quantum computers do anything in my lifetime. In what I have years I have left, not very many of them on this. I don't see quantum computing doing that. Within my family, my daughter is a professor at Stanford in physics, and she's an authority on quantum computing. She gives talks about how to build a quantum computer. So you get different points of view even within my family. If there is any, when there is some kind of quantum machinery, it'll be an attached processor. It won't be a whole computer. It'll be something like the GPU is today, where you ship a matrix there, an array there, do some computing, and ship the results back. Do you know that if you have to reboot a quantum computer, how long does it take to reboot a computer? If they lose the cooling in the quantum computer, it takes a week to get it back. So to reboot today's quantum computers takes a week. Now they got to do something better than that before we have a quantum toolbox. Thanks for the question.
Okay, sir. So we'll move on to the next one. So, are there any projects in development from Mathworks?
Are there any projects in development? There's tons
which
of
we
them.
might be able to see in the future.
Hundreds of them.
So, any of your favorites, probably, which you'd like to mention?
Well, there's favorites when I learn new things. I was involved in a project recently, but where we were doing machine learning on trail camera data from wild animals in natural preserves. When they come to watering holes, they get their picture taken. And we're using machine learning to identify those animals. I love that. That was something I had fun working on that. Matlab was involved in the what's its name? The new rover on Mars. Starts with P. So Matlab is involved in modeling the descent and landing, and you model re-entering the atmosphere, the parachute opening. You model that with Matlab, and then you generate code that actually controls the vehicle during the descent and landing, and you send that code up to the
Perseverance.
Perseverance. So Perseverance descent and landing was controlled by a program written by Matlab.
All right.
And that program better be right? It takes 8 minutes to get the signal back, and when you see how the landing went, it's already happened 8 minutes ago. So that control program darn well better be right.
Right. So we'll move to the next one. Okay, this is a technical question. Back in the day, Simulink used to be code based. Our professors told us they had to code in the blocks for Simulinks. Nowadays, it's a drag and drop. How is it optimized, sir?
I don't know much about Simulink.
Right.
I rarely use it. I know some of the people that work on it, and how is it optimized? I can't really give a good answer to that. You still have to do both. I mean, you drag it. The drag and drop was there at the very beginning, but if you want to do something that isn't in one of the blocks, you can create a new block. So it's just like Matlab in that regard. In Matlab, you can use a toolbox and get a lot of work done, make some graphs, and never write a line of Matlab code. But then, if you want to do something that isn't done by one of the toolboxes, you write Matlab programs. It's just that the programming language in Simulink is different than Matlab.
Right, sir.
How many? Yeah.
Yes, sir, yes, sir. Go ahead. So, do you want to take more questions?
If I was doing this in front of your audience, I'd ask people how many people in the audience use Simulink. So you use Simulink. You raise your hand. So
there must be a lot of people here using Simulink. So I'll tell you one very interesting fact about SIAM VIT, sir. We hold Mathathon every year, and which is something similar to your modeling, the M Cube which you hold in US, right, sir? We have that in VIT. So people develop new softwares which are mathematically modeled. So we have that every single year, and people come up with unique solutions, and they model everything using MATLAB, mostly using MATLAB, and they come up with unique solutions for that.
That's all coming up. That's coming up this weekend, right? That's coming up tomorrow or the next day. When is your hackathon?
Sir, our hackathon is tomorrow, actually. Our Mathathon is a separate event. That's completely maths-based. This event, the hackathon, is on 9th and 10th of April, and it has a lot of fields like AI, fintech, open innovation, and cybersecurity, and many more. So people can come and give up solutions to any of these in any of these domains. But Mathathon, we have it just for maths, and it's completely maths-based.
Okay, right.
So do you want to take more questions?
A couple more, but yeah, people are probably getting tired of it. But
yes, I realize.
See, when you first began to program, it was written on punch cards. How does that work? Actually, when I first programmed, it wasn't even punched cards. It was paper tape. And we did the numeric codes for the individual machine instructions, like load this number into a register, add this number to it, store the result back. That's 3 operations. And we punched numeric code in the paper tape. If you wanted to change your program, you could actually take and put a piece of tape over the holes in the paper tape and punch new ones. The cards, where's the picture of the cards? I can go back and so, oops. See if I can get this. Okay, now if I go. Oh, let's see. I want to do this to blow it up. Ah. So you can't read that, can you? It actually says linear equation solver with iterative improvement. So this is actually, this says subroutine solve. And then the third one has a dimension statement. So that's a beginning of the program that eventually became the backslash in MATLAB. This is programmed in Fortran. You had a deck of these cards. There could be, there's at least several dozen cards, probably several hundred in your deck. You take the deck into the computer center, put it in a tray with other jobs. It gets run in the computer center. The output gets printed. You get the output back in some kind of bin with your student number on it. You find you've made a syntax error, and so you have to punch a few more cards, stick them in, replace the ones in your deck, submit the job again. You'll get the output back. Maybe an hour later, maybe overnight, and that's how we wrote programs. And that the first MATLAB was intended to allow you to interact directly with the computer on the terminals that were available at the time, and eliminate that all those load and eliminate that business of getting your output back later. Okay, long story.
Right, sir.
Long answer.
So we loved that answer. So final question.
Final question.
One final question. Yes, sir. So what is the meaning behind the MATLAB logo? And as I understand, MATLAB was actually Matlab because it was a matrix calculator. So it should have been Matlab, but it was MATLAB. Just the short story behind that, if you could get to know a little. The logo and the name. That's the last question.
You're absolutely, that's two questions. You're right. It should be Matlab because it's short for matrix. But we got MATLAB. Let's see. Let's do. Wanted a short answer. You're not getting it, are you? Let's see if this works. Okay. There's a vibrating violin string, one-dimensional vibration. We go to there's a vibrating square. Let's make it a little faster. Here's a vibrating disc. So this is like a tambourine or like the head of a drum. This is a wave on a tambourine. And if we
I see. I
Here's
think our
just-
viewers will be able to make.
what? Hello?
I think our viewers will now be able to understand where this is going. I think they have an idea now.
Just a minute. So there's the vibrating L-shaped membrane. That's the differential equation. And one last thing. There's my Mathworks business card, but the card should really look like this. Oh, who's here? There we go.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. I think that's one of
All
the
right.
coolest stories behind the logo.
So, thank you all very much. I've had a lot of fun today, and I'm glad to meet the people from VIT.
Thank you so much for coming, sir. It was an honor to have you. And we can't tell you, we couldn't believe it when we first saw your email. It was a shock to us, and we were jumping for 2 minutes that, oh my God, sir replied. And genuinely, we were so happy that you were able to make it and take time off your busy schedule. And once again, thank you so much, sir.
Well, thank you. I obviously enjoy doing this, and I'm glad to have the opportunity. So, thank you, guys. Be safe. Take care of yourself.